falando aqui. Olha aí, escuta aí. Oi, 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 oi. Oi, oi, tá flutuando, tá vendo? Oi, oi, oi. Tá. Aham. Dois, 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 dois. No 4. Já deixa no 4, né? Vê se o vermelhinho tá travado. Não? Eu tenho. Pega aqui comigo aqui, ó. Beleza. Qualquer coisa, depois nós troca outra também, Felipe, lá da ponta. Ah. Tava ouvindo? Dois, 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 dois. Eu tô colado aqui também.
Dear participants, please take your seats. We are about to begin.
S'il vous plaît, prenez place. Please have a seat.
Can I put these here? And this is the one we want most. Is that okay?
Yes. Distingués délégués, chers participants, nous allons
Distinguished delegates, dear participants, we are about to resume our work. I hope that you have had a restful evening after a very busy day yesterday, during which we made significant headway on our agenda. Today we shall begin, as agreed, with the reports from the various groups, and we shall begin with the report of the Credentials Committee. May I invite the chair of the Credentials Committee to please read their report.
Meeting yesterday on the 24th of March, the committee validated another 7 credentials and rejected 1. Thus, of today, the committee has validated a total of 58 credentials and rejected a total of 6. We request to the parties that have not yet submitted their credentials to please submit them as soon as possible. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam. And I join you in urging parties who have not submitted their credentials to do so as soon as possible. Now, let us move on to the working groups, beginning with the budget working group. And I invite the budget working group chair to please report to us on the work underway in the working group. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Good morning. The terrestrial working group met last night and considered documents 27.1, 27.2, document 27.3, 31.2.2, 31.2.3, 31.2.4, 31.3.3, 31.2.5, 31.3.5, and the 27.4, and also considered lastly two documents on the chimpanzees, 31.2.1 and 31.3.1, and requested the Secretariat to prepare the CRPs and process the documents as expected. There was a lot of constructive engagements, and happy with the progress made by the parties in the deliberation. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank Zimbabwe for this summary of progress made in the working group on terrestrial species. I now invite the budget working group to report on progress made. May I invite the chair of the budget working group to take the floor? The United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Yesterday over at lunchtime and in the evening, and made excellent progress in reviewing the elements of our budget from the period from 2027 to 2029, considering the various elements in scenarios 1 and 2. We also did a first discussion of the elements of the draft resolution to understand new proposals that parties wanted to make, and we reviewed the program of work. We will meet again today at lunchtime to continue our deliberations, and we look forward to further discussions amongst parties on this critical issue. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, le Royaume.
I thank the United Kingdom. Now let us move on to the working group on aquatic species. I invite the chair of the working group to please report on progress made within the group.
Oui.
Please go ahead.
Aquatic Working Group met at lunchtime and had a productive start to discussions. The working group discussed the following items: 25.1.1 bycatch, 25.1.2 bycatch of chondrichthyan species, 25.1.3 fish aggregating devices, 25.1.4 aquatic wild meat, and 25.2.1 marine pollution. The CRP for 25.1.4 aquatic wild meat has been finalised in the working group for consideration in the Committee of the Whole. Discussions on item 25.1.1 bycatch, 25.1.2 bycatch of chondrichthyan species, 25.1.3 FADs, and 25.2.1 marine pollution will continue today at lunchtime. We are looking forward to fruitful discussions in that session. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup pour.
Thank you very much for this report on progress made within the aquatic working group. May I now invite the chair of the avian species working group to take the floor.
But I will report back on his behalf. We made good progress. We covered 26.3.1 flyways, 26.3.2 seabirds and marine flyways, 26.4.1 action plans for birds, 26.4.2 the multi-species action plan to conserve African, Eurasian and Australian bustards, 26.4.3 the Global Action Plan for the Conservation of the Steppe Eagle, 26.5 the Action Plan for Migratory Land Birds in the African Eurasian region, 26.6 the Conservation of African Eurasian vultures, 26.7 the Saker falcon, and 26.8 internationally important raptor areas. We will be continuing our discussions at lunchtime today. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, sir, for that report. I see that positive progress seems to have been made with a good atmosphere, which I believe bodes well for our future proceedings. May I urge delegates to continue working in this spirit of flexibility, consensus seeking, to ensure that we move forward smoothly with our agenda. There is one remaining working group on cross-cutting issues, and we shall now hear the report of the chair. We will hear the report of the chair of this working group this afternoon, because the chair is not here this morning. So this will be discussed at the beginning of the afternoon session.
Chair, I am in the room if you want to hear from the cross-cutting working group.
D'accord.
Very well, that would be fantastic. I was informed that you were not present, but that was incorrect. Please go ahead.
To consider only one document, which was document 14.3 on resource mobilisation. This is an issue critical to implementation of the Convention, and this sentiment was keenly expressed within our discussions, particularly when considering very different socio-economic circumstances. Thanks to the excellent support from the Secretariat and the very constructive, considered and respectful discussion between parties, we have agreed text on the document, i.e. Resolution 1025 Rev COP15, on enhancing engagement with a global environment facility, and the accompanying draft decisions, which will now be submitted as a CRP. During our discussions, there was clear support for exploration of other resourcing opportunities and a strategy for how to make this work for the benefit of migratory species, which would include, but not be limited to, the GEF, which is the subject of that Resolution 1025 Rev COP14. Therefore, to capture this, text was agreed for a standalone draft decision under the title Resource Mobilisation Strategy, which relates to a request to the Standing Committee with support from the Secretariat to develop such a strategy to be presented at COP16. This short new text will be included within the CRP. Again, with thanks to the Secretariat and parties, we have tried to ensure standardisation in how we have used text and terminology throughout. And finally, again, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the members of the working group for their collaborative and constructive contributions to get us to this agreed text on this important issue. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for this report, and my apologies once again. Now, I invite New Zealand to take the floor, says the chair.
Discussed document 15, the Samarkand Strategic Plan for Migratory Species. We had a constructive discussion. We resolved some of the more simple issues, and we had a discussion on the indicators and actions under Target 4.3. However, decided to wait until after last night's cross-cutting working group session had discussed 14.3, resource mobilisation, before coming back to the issues under Target 4.3. We will need to reconvene again to have a further discussion on those issues and to review some suggested changes to the decision. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. Now, with your permission, I'll give the floor to the Secretariat to share some information regarding the conference room papers and to make some announcements. Miss Melanie, you have the floor.
to announce that a number of conference room papers are now online. You'll find them under the In Session tab on the website where documents are. We have this morning the report of day 2, documents 18.2 and 18.3, document 19, document 25.1.4, document 28.2, 28.6, and 28.13. These CRPs will all be taken up at the start of the afternoon session and discussed then. Further CRPs are coming online momentarily, so please check back during the course of the morning. I've also had a request to just clarify exactly which documents have been sent to the cross-cutting working group yesterday, and I thought that would be a useful thing to do. As we've already heard, document 14.3 on resource mobilisation has been discussed and a CRP is under preparation. We also heard that document 15 on the SPMS is under discussion. Document 20.1 on the next State of the World's Migratory Species is to be discussed. Document 28.5 on wildlife health is to be discussed, as is 28.9 on cumulative effects. So there's 4 documents awaiting discussion in the cross-cutting working group. And finally, I'd just like to refer back to document 16.1 on sessional committee members. Yesterday we discussed it and it was decided it would go to the cross-cutting working group. However, in the Bureau yesterday evening, the Bureau decided that it would be better if this was handled by the regional groups, and so as you will have heard in your regional groups this morning, each regional group should be prepared to send a representative to a meeting to be organised on Friday morning or soon after to discuss the nominations of the new positions of the COP-appointed councillors. So to reiterate, that will be a special contact group of regional members to discuss document 16.1 regarding the new COP-appointed councillors. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Dear delegates and participants, having heard the reports of the working groups providing us with information on progress with work, I now invite you to take up our agenda once more, and we will start with item 28.14, multiple systems of knowledge. And I would call on Ms. Dagmar from the Secretariat to present the document 28.14.
Ref 1 on multiple systems of knowledge, which was prepared by the Scientific Council. The discussion on the document has taken place in the intersessional working group on multiple systems of knowledge, including traditional and indigenous knowledge, established by the Scientific Council and chaired by Martin Hilziger from the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program. This document contains 2 annexes, Annex 1 with draft decisions and Annex 2 containing a report on multiple systems of knowledge to support effective migratory species conservation. This document has been revised by the 8th meeting of the Scientific Council. The document also proposed amendments to Resolution 13.7, guidelines for preparing and assessing proposals for the amendment of CMS appendices, and to Resolution 12.28, Ref COP15 on concerted actions. These proposals are presented in separate documents, and while these documents need to be read in conjunction with this umbrella document and form together a package, it is proposed, Mr. Chair, that the discussion now focuses on document 28.14 on multiple systems of knowledge only, and the 2 other documents containing draft amended resolutions will come separately. Under document 28.14, Rev 1, multiple systems of knowledge, the Conference of the Parties is therefore recommended to note the report contained in Annex 2 of this document, adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 of this document. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Delegates and participants, the floor is now open on this agenda item on multiple systems of knowledge. Brazil, you have the floor.
Here in Campo Grande, at the gateway of the Pantanal, we are reminded that the great ecosystems that sustain migratory species have never stood apart from the peoples who have long inhabited and cared for them. Indigenous peoples and local communities are the historical gatekeepers of these lands and waters. Through their presence, their knowledge, and their sustainable ways of life across forests, wetlands, savannas, coasts, and rivers, they help keep biodiversity alive and landscapes connected. Their stewardship, especially when traditional knowledge is brought into dialogue with science in a spirit of mutual respect and complementarity, is essential to ensuring that migratory species continue to find refuge, food, and safe passage, and that conserved areas remain vibrant for the benefit of both nature and people. Brazil is happy to support the document, given its convergence with Brazilian experiences in participatory management and knowledge co-production, including initiatives such as Fazenda Pantaneira Sustentável or farms in Pantanal, sustainable farms in Pantanal, developed in the Pantanal to reconcile production, biodiversity, conservation, and long-term sustainability through science-based assessments and cooperation among different actors. Public reporting on the initiative highlights its role in monitoring environmental, social, cultural, and productive indicators, and in promoting a model that seeks to align sustainable livelihoods with the conservation of the biome. At the same time, Brazil considers it's important that the operative text reflect more faithfully the broader scope of the mandate. Brazil also considers that any operationalization of this agenda should remain non-binding, subject to national circumstances, and clearly observe free, prior, and informed consent, the protection of traditional knowledge, and respect for the cultural specificities of indigenous peoples and local communities. These safeguards are already reflected in the analytical section of the document and should, in our view, be better carried out in the draft decisions. With these adjustments, Brazil stands ready to engage constructively. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank you, Brazil. Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. The delegation of Argentina would like that every time that we have indigenous and local knowledge mentioned in the document, we should immediately add the word relevant. So the sentence would be indigenous and local knowledge, which is relevant. So in 28, we understand that the term of gender, as it was set out in the Rome Statute, Article 23, and we should have women or women as necessary. And with relation to references to indigenous peoples, we want to avoid selective approaches which look at giving a superior level to other minority groups. So we understand that it's essential that we keep the principle of equality before the will of the various stakeholders and communities affected. And finally, Argentina would like to highlight that any measures adopted in this area must be based on the best scientific evidence and the best knowledge available. Thank you. Thank you very much, Argentina. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would like to thank the Scientific Council and its Intersessional Working Group for the preparation of this item. I'd also like to thank the distinguished delegate from Brazil for his intervention highlighting the benefits of Indigenous and local knowledge to the conservation and sustainable management of wildlife here in Brazil. Indigenous and local knowledge remains significantly underrepresented within CMS processes, despite its growing recognition across global biodiversity governance. Frameworks such as the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the work of IPBES highlight the vital contributions of Indigenous peoples and local communities to conservation. These communities are defined by deep intergenerational connections to place and nature, and their knowledge systems offer perspectives that can meaningfully strengthen the Convention's work. We note that Indigenous and local knowledge holders already can engage with CMS as observers and through party delegations, and that several CMS agreements, including the Gorilla Agreement and AIWA, have pioneered community-based conservation. And some parties are already bringing this knowledge into relevant CMS documents. For example, New Zealand has done a fantastic job of demonstrating how it is possible to include Indigenous and local knowledge in listing proposals that seek to enhance the understanding and context of benefits associated with listing for those species. These experiences demonstrate the benefits of integrating Indigenous and local knowledge into conservation action. Australia considers that bringing together Indigenous and local knowledge and conventional science should be a collaborative process founded on empowered and respectful partnerships. Document 28.14 Rev 1 provides a valuable starting point for advancing this approach. We believe the document offers a constructive pathway for incorporating Indigenous and local knowledge into the Convention's scientific processes, where it is appropriate and useful to do so. We note that tangible recommendations will be taken up under items 30.1 and 31.1, where parties can consider guidance on Indigenous and local knowledge may appropriately inform species listing proposals and concerted actions. Document 28.14 sets out the draft decisions for Standing Committee and the Secretariat to support the integration of multiple knowledge systems across CMS processes and platforms more broadly, where relevant and appropriate. In our view, this discussion presents an important opportunity for CMS to progress towards genuine and effective engagement with Indigenous and local knowledge holders. We are fully supportive of the draft decisions for the Standing Committee and the Secretariat to facilitate the consideration of the integration of multiple systems of knowledge into CMS processes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Australia. I would like to recall and remind everyone, please, that state parties have a 3-minute limit for speaking time. The European Union, you have the floor.
Of valuing and incorporating multiple systems of knowledge and understanding and appreciate the work of the Scientific Council and the Working Group in accordance with Decision 14.9. The EU and its Member States noted the report contained in Annex 2 of this document and believe that it would serve as a very crucial reference base and guidance for further work in an analogous direction in the future. The EU and its Member States support adoption of the draft decision presented in Annex 1 of the document with small clarifying amendments and provided that the edits of the Scientific Council are endorsed. The EU and its Member States also agree with the deletion of Decision 14.9. Finally, we would like to ask the Secretariat to ensure consistent use of language throughout the CMS decisions and resolutions when mentioning indigenous and local knowledge. We only have one very small amendment, that's in point 15.bb, paragraph A, second line. We would like to read indigenous and local knowledge. Would like to delete or there. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, l'Union européenne.
I thank the European Union. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Working group on multiple systems of knowledge, including traditional and indigenous knowledge, for this informative report. We agree that this knowledge can greatly enhance the breadth of information on which to base decisions for migratory species. This information can be very specific and local knowledge held by indigenous communities that is not available through any other source. Sometimes it is long-held knowledge that goes back generations, which can give a much longer perspective than available scientific research. This information can support and in some cases back up the scientific evidence that underpins decisions. In New Zealand, we have a legal obligation to incorporate the knowledge of our indigenous Māori people into our species conservation, so it's embedded into our work. I'd like to give a couple of examples from the New Zealand experience. Firstly, in development of the listing proposals for gadfly petrels and flesh-footed shearwater that we will consider tomorrow, we worked closely with our Māori tribes and sub-tribes to gather information specific to the small offshore islands where the birds breed, information on the behaviour of the birds, and to understand the cultural importance of these species to Māori. This is evidenced by the annex to document 30.2.6, which is the flesh-footed shearwater listing proposal, which is a letter setting out the perspectives of the hapu, which is sub-tribes, Ngāmahanga and Ngāti Tairi. The letter appended beautifully articulates the deep cultural and ecological significance of the flesh-footed shearwater to these indigenous people. And we annexed it to the proposal so that it could be considered as an input into the COP decision on this listing proposal. Another very practical example is that through indigenous knowledge, we have maps of colonies of the Appendix 2 listed species, the black petrel, which historically bred on New Zealand's inland volcanic mountains up to 100 years ago, but declined when invasive species were introduced to New Zealand, to the point that it has now disappeared from that area. This indigenous knowledge means that we could potentially use this area for translocation of the birds in future, since we are now aware that they have successfully bred there in the past. So in conclusion, New Zealand welcomes this report. We see it as a useful resource, noting that it's up to parties and other stakeholders as to how they use the report. We support the associated COP decisions and the associated amendments to the resolutions on listing proposals and concerted actions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. Cook Islands, you have the floor.
Group on multiple systems of knowledge, including traditional and indigenous knowledge and systems. We welcome the report and support the proposed draft decisions. For the Cook Islands, this agenda item is of fundamental importance. As a Pacific small island developing state, our conservation efforts are deeply rooted in community stewardship and traditional knowledge systems, which have guided the sustainable management of migratory species and their habitats for generations. In the Cook Islands, the conservation efforts of the kakirori bird or the Rarotonga flycatcher has been a concerted effort of traditional leaders and landowners, government, and the community. Chair, we wish to highlight 4 key points. Firstly, is that the value of multiple knowledge systems for effective implementation. We strongly support the recognition that different knowledge systems provide complementary and mutually reinforcing insights for conservation. Integrating scientific knowledge with traditional and local knowledge can strengthen decision-making, improve the accuracy of assessments, and enhance conservation outcomes for migratory species. Secondly, on the right-based and culturally appropriate approaches, the Cook Islands emphasizes that engagement with Indigenous peoples and local communities must be grounded in respect for rights, customary governance, including free, prior, and informed consent. We also stress that not all knowledge is meant to be shared, and appropriate safeguards must be in place to prevent misappropriation or misuse. Thirdly is on partnership. We support moving beyond ad hoc participation toward meaningful partnerships and co-production of knowledge. This includes supporting community-based monitoring, participatory research, and long-term engagement processes that build trust and deliver shared outcomes. Fourth is on practical implementation and capacity support for SIDS. For SIDS, effective integration of multiple knowledge systems require time, resources, and tailored approaches. We therefore stress this importance. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Cook Islands.
Thank you very much, Cook Islands. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Panama welcomes and supports the adoption of this document on multiple systems of knowledge. We consider this recognizes a fundamental reality that the effective implementation and protection of migratory species cannot just be based on conventional knowledge, but we have to also be based on the knowledge of Indigenous peoples and local communities. They are holders of knowledge, they're custodians of biodiversity in general and migratory species, with in-depth territorial knowledge that has been accumulated over time, understanding ecosystems and climate change. They are dynamic, intergenerational and essential fonts of knowledge and to help us gather information, improve monitoring and work on conservation. And this approach is also fully aligned with the CBD and the coming Montreal Global Framework, and it looks at the knowledge and the full and effective participation of Indigenous people and local communities so that we achieve the global biodiversity goals. We recognize and welcome the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the CMS processes and the free, prior and informed consent and the recognition of their knowledge as complementary and not subordinate to science. If we want to maintain conservation status, we must ensure that those who participate in the generation of knowledge are involved in decision making. Panama supports its adoption and would like to highlight its commitment to ensure that this inclusive approach will lead to a more just, legitimate and efficient conservation of migratory species and humanity. Thank you. Thank you, Panama. That was the last request for the floor on my list. And based on the discussions that we have heard, I would suggest that the Secretariat set up and draw up a conference room paper which takes into account the various and different contributions and the ideas that have been shared by the stakeholders, and we will come back. Brazil, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair.
Well, if you allow them to speak, please. They're asking for the floor. Thank you.
D'accord, oui, ils peuvent intervenir.
Yes, of course they may.
Bom dia a todos. Obrigado, senhor presidente. Meu nome é Edinalda Nascimento, sou pantaneira e estou representando os povos indígenas e comunidades tradicionais presentes nessa convenção. Nós, povos indígenas e comunidades locais, somos um elo essencial conectando a natureza para sustentar todas as formas de vida. Nossa visão de mundo, como povos indígenas e comunidades locais, revela que os nossos conhecimentos tradicionais são fundamentais para a conservação das espécies migratórias, ao mesmo tempo em que garante aos meios
s'il vous plaît, est-ce qu'il y a donc par rapport à la traduction, est-ce que vous écoutez la traduction? Non, il y a plusieurs. Ah oui, les États partis n'entendent pas la traduction. Est-ce qu'on peut régler cela, s'il vous plaît? Accordez-nous, s'il vous plaît, un instant.
Sir, the English booth is on standby to do this. If the delegate would like to repeat, the English booth is here and we will do the interpretation.
Tout est prêt, tout est dans le bon sens. Et j'invite...
I think everything's ready now, so we can start. If we could please ask the delegate to start once more, and our sincere apologies, so that the room may hear your presentation, and our sincere apologies, says the chair. The delegate is invited to proceed. Thank you very much, Chair. Good day to everybody. On behalf of, I'm Nada Nascimento, and I come from the Pantanal region. I represent the indigenous peoples and local communities here. We, the indigenous peoples and local communities, are dependent on ensuring that all nature is there to sustain all forms of life. And we see that traditional knowledge is essential to conserve migratory species. At the same time, it guarantees the subsistence and livelihoods for all of us and our ways of life. This was based on the direct relationship with the territory, and that contributes to maintaining biodiversity and highlights the importance of maintaining species in the territories we have traditionally occupied. And so we are grateful that this document recognizes the relevance of our traditional knowledge and the work for migratory species, and to ensure that this will be involved. And we want to be seeing an essential element with an integration of local knowledge and with scientific knowledges, so that we can support and promote the connectivity between different knowledge systems. We, the people, indigenous peoples and local communities, support this document and understand that there are multiple systems of knowledge and that they should be considered within the convention with a respectful and effective recognition of our system. And we would like to thank the Secretariat of the CMS for having ensured that there are spaces for the inclusion of IPLC, to ensure that we have work and we are taken into account. We have community participation, livelihoods are taken into account, and we have effective participation of IPLC, including in digital platforms such as those of the Convention, which will ensure that IPLC can contribute directly by sharing our knowledge and strengthening our participation in the decision-making processes. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Nada de nós sem nós. Nada sobre nós sem nós.
Thank you very much for this very important statement and the wonderful presentation. Indigenous peoples are very important for the implementation of the convention. So I see that Fiji has requested the floor.
Made by other colleagues from Cook Islands, Brazil, New Zealand and Australia. Fiji acknowledged the valuable work of the Scientific Council in preparing this important document, which highlights the role of indigenous and local knowledge systems that provide complementary place-based insights that enhance scientific understanding and in improving the conservation outcomes. We recognize that such knowledge systems are not only critical for biodiversity conservation, but are also deeply interwoven with livelihoods, cultural identity, and stewardship of natural resources. Chair, in Fiji, indigenous knowledge, grounded in the Ethoke traditional governance systems and customary practices, plays a central role in conserving migratory species and their habitats. Local communities apply traditional ecological knowledge through mechanisms such as tambu areas, the customary marine closures, seasonal harvesting restrictions, and community-based resource management approaches. These practices contribute directly to the protection of marine species, including sea turtle, the cetaceans, and migratory fish species by safeguarding their critical habitats and breeding grounds. Furthermore, traditional knowledge systems in Fiji are transmitted intergenerationally and are embedded within cultural protocols, spiritual beliefs, and community decision-making processes. Fiji emphasizes the importance of the prior informed consent and respecting the cultural sensitivities when engaging in the indigenous peoples and local communities, as highlighted in the documents. Meaningful participation requires equitable partnerships, trust building, and recognition of knowledge holders' rights. Chair, Fiji supports the adoption of draft decision contained in Annex 1 of this document. We particularly welcome efforts to enhance inclusion of indigenous and local knowledge beyond scientific processes, strengthen outreach to indigenous peoples and local communities, and promote knowledge-sharing platforms that respect cultural integrity and intellectual property. Moving forward, Fiji encouraged the Secretariat and the parties to support the capacity building, resource mobilization, and inclusive platforms that enables indigenous peoples and communities to actively contribute to CMS processes. Chair, in closing, Fiji affirms achieving the objectives of the convention, and the Samarkand strategic plan will acquire a genuine partnership between science and indigenous systems. By embracing this holistic approach, we can ensure more effective and equitable and sustainable conservation of migratory species. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Fiji, for that statement. I was just wrapping up on this item, and in doing so, may I suggest that the Secretariat draft a conference room paper on this item, which would incorporate the amendments and suggestions made by parties. I see no objections to this proposal. It is so decided. The Secretariat shall prepare a CRP for this item. Now, let us move on to the next item on our agenda, on the amendments of Annexes 1 and 2 of the Convention. We'll move on to 30.3 with the proposals for the amendments of the appendices of the CMS. So I invite the Secretariat to present document 30.1.
Preparing and assessing proposals for the amendment of CMS appendices. The document was prepared by the Scientific Council and the Secretariat based on the input from the Intersessional Working Group on Multiple Systems of Knowledge, including traditional and indigenous knowledge, which was chaired by Martin Hitziger from SPRAP. The document contains one annex with proposed amendments to Resolution 13.7, guidelines for preparing and assessing proposals for the amendment of CMS appendices. And as already explained, this document should be read in conjunction with the previous document, 28.14 on multiple systems of knowledge. The draft amendments to Resolution 13.7 contain a limited number of changes proposed by the working group in order to recognize indigenous and local knowledge when preparing proposals to amend the CMS appendices. The Secretariat also proposed minor corrections to streamline the text of the resolution. The document has been revised by the 8th meeting of the Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council. The Conference of Parties is therefore recommended to adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 13.7 contained in the annex of this document. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dagmar. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, the floor is open on this item.
L'Union européenne
The European Union
and its member states agreed to adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 13.7 as contained in the Annex 1, except for additions related to multiple systems of knowledge in two places, namely, operational paragraph of Resolution 13.7, 6 bis in page 4, and point 4.5 in Annex 2. We agree that multiple knowledge systems, including indigenous and local knowledge, can provide insights on migratory species and management approaches when conservation actions are planned and implemented. We support their application in those instances, in particular for the implementation of the concerted actions. However, we do not support incorporating this concept in Resolution 13.7 and the guidelines. As already stated in the resolution, the best scientific evidence available should be used in preparing and assessing listing proposals. Finally, the EU and its member states would kindly ask the Secretariat to ensure consistent use of the terms indigenous and local knowledge. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, the European Union. Brazil, you have the floor.
Document as presented with some comments very similar to the ones present by the EU, notably in paragraph 4.5, 6.3 and 6.4, stating we really need to be very coherent with other processes, and when we are referring to local indigenous peoples and local communities, we must be very attentive to the and, not or, in the text. So we would please ask the Secretary to correct those references in the text when we're referring to indigenous and local communities, not indigenous and or local communities. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. Australia, you have the floor.
S'il vous plaît, activez.
Please, could Australia's microphone be activated?
In document 30.1, noting that we do support Brazil's intervention regarding consistent referencing to Indigenous and local communities. I would note that I think it's important within the guidelines to include a prompt for parties, if you like, for listing proponents, just to indicate particular areas where it may be relevant to include Indigenous or local knowledge in species listing proposals, and that is what the text within the listing guidelines is seeking to achieve. So it was a bit slightly unclear for me exactly what the EU was not comfortable with within the guidelines, so it would be useful to see it actually when the document is ready. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, l'Australie.
Thank you, Australia. New Zealand, you have the floor.
New Zealand strongly supports the suggested changes to Resolution 13.7, in particular the amendments to incorporate the multiple systems of knowledge, including Indigenous and local knowledge, into listing proposals. We note that OP 6 bis, it invites parties where possible, so there's no obligation to do that. It is, as Australia says, a prompt if that's something that parties wish to do and is appropriate in this situation. I'd like to also agree with the other comments made by Australia and Brazil. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. Are there any further requests for the floor? I see none. Therefore, may I suggest that on the basis of the discussions in the room, it may be necessary to refer this to the Cross-Cutting Issues Working Group in order to go into more detail on these discussions. I see no objections to that way forward. We shall therefore proceed in this manner. It is so decided, and this matter will be referred to the Cross-Cutting Issues Working Group. Dear colleagues, distinguished delegates, dear participants, let us now move on to the next item on our agenda, item 31.1 on concerted actions. And may I ask Ms. Dagmar from the Secretariat to present this item? Please go ahead.
Concerted actions was prepared by the Scientific Council based on the input from the Intersessional Working Group on Multiple Systems of Knowledge, including Traditional and Indigenous Knowledge, which was chaired by Martin Hitziger from the SPREP. The document contains one annex with proposed amendments to Annex 1 of Resolution 12.28, Ref COP15, Concerted Actions. Again, as the previous document, this one also should be read in conjunction with document 28.14 on multiple systems of knowledge. The draft amendments to Resolution 12.28, Ref COP15, contain a limited number of changes proposed by the working group in order to recognize indigenous and local knowledge when preparing proposals for concerted actions. This document has been revised by the Scientific Council at the 8th meeting of its sessional committee. The Conference of Parties is recommended to adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 12.28, Ref COP15, contained in the annex of this document. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dagmar. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, the floor is now open on this item of the agenda.
Je vois pas de demande de parole.
I see no requests for the floor. May I take it that the Committee of the Whole is ready to adopt this and send it to the plenary of the Conference of Parties, or do you need time to consult on this? Brazil, you have the floor.
We have a slight similar comment as we did previously with regard to the inclusion of paragraph 2b's. We support the inclusion, but we would need to change a bit the redaction to reflect the CDB agreed text, in the sense that would be inclusion of indigenous and local knowledge about the species, that is to remove the word or and none, just to be very consistent with language adopted in other conventions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup le Brésil.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Are there any other requests for the floor? Very well. I see no further requests. May I suggest that the Secretariat prepare a conference room paper on the basis of the comments made by Brazil, which we will come back to later on in order to consider the CIP. Are you in agreement? Are there any objections? I see none. The Committee of the Whole, therefore, agrees to request the Secretariat prepare a conference room paper to be considered at a later stage. Thank you very much.
Je viens d'être informé.
I have just been informed by the Secretariat that there seem to be some slight technical issues regarding the translation. We are going to ask for just a few minutes and we'll come back.
To remain in the room, to wait for a while in order to fix this.
Distinguished delegates, dear participants, we are now ready to resume. The issue has now been resolved. And now let us move on to the next item on our agenda regarding the appendices of the CMS. And we shall move on to item 29.1, treatment of species included within aggregated families listed in Appendix 2. Please, Ms. Dagmar from the Secretariat, could I give you the floor to introduce this document?
Included within aggregated families listed on Appendix 2. This document was prepared by the Scientific Council. The discussion on the document has taken place in the intersessional working group of the Scientific Council on taxonomic and nomenclatural issues and on potential taxa for listing, which was chaired by Stephen Garnett, the COP appointed Councillor for Birds, who also made an important input into this document. This document contains two annexes. Annex 1 was proposed amendments to Resolution 14.19, and Annex 2 was a draft decision. This document has been endorsed by the Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council at its 8th meeting without any comments or revisions. The Conference of Parties is therefore recommended to adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 14.19 contained in Annex 1 of this document, adopt the draft decision as contained in Annex 2 of this document, and delete decisions from COP14. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dagmar. The floor is now open on this item. I see no request for the floor. May I take it that the Committee of the Whole agrees to refer this document as it stands to the Conference of the Parties plenary? I see no objections or alternative proposals. It is so decided. This document, including its resolution and draft decisions, will be directly referred to the Conference of the Parties plenary for adoption. Thank you very much, distinguished delegates, dear participants. Now, let us move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 29.2 on maintaining lists of species included in CMS appendices. May I invite Ms. Dagmar to introduce this document. You have the floor.
Species included in CMS appendices was prepared by the Secretariat with input from the Scientific Council Working Group on maintaining lists of species listed in CMS appendices, which was kindly chaired by the COP-appointed Councillor for Birds, Stephen Garnett. This document contains 4 annexes. Annex 1 with draft decisions. Annex 2 contains the report of the Working Group on maintaining species lists of species listed in CMS appendices. Annex 3 contains the preliminary findings of the review of the taxonomy, nomenclature, and range state information for species listed on CMS Appendix 1 and 2 and CMS instruments. Annex 4 contains the assessment of migratory movements of birds for the purpose of disaggregating families under Appendix 2 of CMS. There are also 3 related information documents. These documents contain the background data of the range state analysis of species listed in CMS appendices. These are documents INF 29.2a, maintaining lists of species non-avian listed in CMS appendices, and INF 29.2b, about maintaining lists of species avian listed in CMS appendices. Additional information document in 29.2c, prepared by UNEP WCMC, contains information on possible future updates of functionalities of Species Plus database. The document also has an addendum where the Scientific Council comments and recommendations to the COP are provided. These comments were of editorial nature and they have been captured in the revised version of the document published by the Secretariat. The Conference of Parties is therefore recommended to adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 of this document, consider the advice contained in the report of the Working Group on maintaining lists of species included in CMS appendices as per Annex 2 of this document, and also as referenced in Decision 15cc, paragraph A, then take note of the preliminary findings of the review of the taxonomy, nomenclature, and range state information for species listed on CMS Appendix 1 and 2, and CMS instruments contained in Annex 3 of this document, and then to take note of the assessment of migratory movements of birds for the purpose of disaggregating families under Appendix 2 of the Convention on Migratory Species as contained in Annex 4 of this document. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dagmar. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, the floor is now open. I see no request for the floor on this item. May I take it that the Committee of the Whole wishes to transfer this document as it stands directly to the Conference of Parties for adoption? I see no objections or alternative proposals. Therefore, with your agreement, this document will be transferred as it stands to the plenary of the Conference of Parties for adoption. It is so decided, and thank you very much. Now, let us move on to the next item, item 29.3 on taxonomy and nomenclature updates. And once again, I invite Ms. Dagmar to introduce this document, document 29.3. You have the floor.
Nomenclature updates was prepared by the Secretariat with input from the Scientific Council Working Group on Taxonomic and Nomenclature Issues, which was kindly chaired by the COP-appointed Councillor for Birds, Stephen Garnett. This document contains 3 annexes. Annex 1 contains proposed amendments to Resolution 12.27, Ref. COP15, on taxonomy and nomenclature. Annex 2 contains a draft decision. Annex 3 contains a summary of proposed changes in a nomenclature and taxonomy for CMS-listed species resulting from changes in standard nomenclature. There is also a related information document in 29.3, which contains excerpts for each fish species currently listed in the CMS appendices, as downloaded on 19th of August 25, in line with paragraph 2 of Resolution 12.27, Ref. COP14. The document also has an addendum where the Scientific Council comments and recommendations to the COP are provided. These comments do not seem to request or require an amendment of the draft decisions and draft amendments to Resolution 12.27, Ref. COP14. I would like to bring to the attention of the committee that paragraphs 18 to 24 and paragraph 28, as well as annexes 1 and 3 of the document, were revised by the Secretariat on 6th of March to reflect recent taxonomical changes to the standard references for fish, specifically for sturgeons. As a result, it is proposed to introduce different nomenclature reference for sturgeons from that for the remaining fish species. With respect to recommendations to the Conference of the Parties, it's recommended to adopt the draft amendments to the annex to Resolution 12.27 RevCop 14 on taxonomy and nomenclature contained in Annex 1 of this document. Adopt the draft decision 15AA contained in Annex 2 of this document. Adopt the changes to taxonomy and nomenclature of species listed in Appendix 1 and 2 as contained in Annex 3 of this document, noting that the reference date for the marine mammals standard reference is July 2025. The date for the fish standard reference is 19 August 2025 for all fish except for Acipenseriformes, for which the 12th of May 2023 version remains the standard reference, and that the currently applicable version of the standard reference for bird taxonomy is Handbook of the Birds of the World and BirdLife International Digital Checklist of the Birds of the World, version 10.0 from October 2025. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dagmar. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, the floor is now open on this item of our agenda. The European Union has the floor.
And the experts on the proposal for updating the taxonomy and nomenclature and support its adoption, considering also the general comments made by the Scientific Council. We acknowledge the proposal will facilitate and contribute positively to AI 18, collaborate with other entities, and agenda item 29.5 towards harmonization of taxonomy and nomenclature. We believe that this process of updating should be established on a regular basis so to have as practicable as possible an up-to-date taxonomy and nomenclature list for the Convention. The EU and its member states adopted draft decision 15.AA contained in Annex 2 of this document. Furthermore, we adopted changes to taxonomy and nomenclature of species listed in Appendix 1 and 2 as contained in Annex 3 of this document. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, l'Union européenne.
I thank the European Union. Do we have any further requests for the floor?
Je vois pas de demande.
I see no further request for the floor. And the intervention from the European Union does not propose any amendments to the document. So I propose that we adopt this document here so that it can be submitted directly for approval at the COP plenary. I see no objections to this proposal, so I understand that the Committee of the Whole confirms this proposal and that we will submit the document as it stands to the COP plenary for adoption. It is so decided, and thank you, delegates and participants. Now, I invite you to move to the next item of our agenda, which is item 29.4, species that meet the criteria for listing on CMS appendices, and I invite Ms. Dagmar to introduce this document.
One on species that meet the criteria for listing on CMS appendices was prepared by the Scientific Council. This document was developed with substantive input from the Intersessional Working Group on Taxonomic and Nomenclature Issues and on Potential Taxa for Listing. established by the Scientific Council and chaired by Stephen Garnett, appointed Councillor for Birds. Stephen also contributed substantially to the updated list of avian species meeting the criteria for listing, while colleagues from the Eurobat Secretariat and the IUCN Species Specialist Group on Bats provided key support in developing the list of potential species of bats for listing in CMS appendices. This document contains two annexes. Annex 1 contains proposed amendments to Resolution 14.20, potential avian taxa for listing, which also includes the proposed change of the title of that resolution into species that meet the criteria for listing on CMS appendices. Annex 2 contains a draft decision. This document has been revised by the Scientific Council at the 8th meeting of its sessional committee. As mentioned in paragraph 11 of this document, at the time of writing, a list of migratory freshwater fishes that meet the criteria for listing on CMS was under development by Zeb Hogan, the COP-appointed Counselor for Fish. This list is now available as part of the Global Assessment of Migratory Freshwater Fishes and annexed to document 25.6.1 freshwater fish, which will be presented and discussed in the working group on aquatic species. The Secretariat proposes that, depending on the outcome of the discussion in the aquatic working group, the list of migratory freshwater fishes that meet the criteria for listing on CMS could be annexed to Resolution 14.20 as another annex next to birds and bats. The Secretariat can reflect the outcome of the aquatic working group in the in-session document, the CRP, for consideration by the Committee of the Whole later this week once the aquatic working group finished their consideration of that document. This being said, the Conference of Parties is recommended under this document to adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 14.20 contained in Annex 1 of this document, adopt the draft decision as contained in Annex 2 of the document, and delete COP14 decisions. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Delegates, the floor is open. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Species that meet the CMS criteria for listing on the appendices. This approach was used to identify a large number of seabird species that have been submitted to COP15 for addition to the appendices. We support similar strategic lists being developed for other taxonomic groups to ensure that only species meeting the migration and poor conservation status thresholds are considered by parties at future COPs. We support the draft amendments and the draft decisions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, New Zealand. Do we have any further requests for the floor?
Je vois pas d'autres.
I see no further request for the floor, and given that the work and discussions will continue within the Aquatic Species Working Group, we will await the outcome of the work of that group, and so the Secretariat will prepare an in-session document, a CRP, which is updated with the work of the group, and then we will come back to it. Is the meeting agreed to progress in this way? I see no objections, so it is so decided. A CRP document will be produced which will take into account the outcome of the aquatic working group's work. Thank you very much. I invite the meeting to move to the next item, item 29.5, towards harmonization of taxonomy and nomenclature. And I call on Ms. Dagmar from the Secretariat once more to introduce this document, 29.5.
Document 29.5 called Towards Harmonization of Taxonomy and Nomenclature was prepared for the Scientific Council by Stephen Garnett, the COP-appointed Counselor for Birds. The Intersessional Scientific Council Working Group on Taxonomic and Nomenclature Issues and Potential Taxa for Listing considered this matter under Stephen's leadership. This document contains one annex with a draft decision. This document has been endorsed by the Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council at its 8th meeting without any comments or revisions. In the decisions to be adopted by the COP, as announced at the opening of the Committee of the Whole, the term external needs to be deleted from the first sentence so that it reads subject to the availability of resources without the external. And the Secretariat will take care of this correction. The Conference of Parties is therefore recommended to adopt the draft decision contained in the annex of this document and delete the COP14 decision. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dagmar. Dear delegates and participants, the floor is open for discussion.
Je vois pas d'intervention.
I see no request for the floor. Does the meeting need time, or may I consider silence as authorization to directly submit this document to the COP plenary for final adoption? I see no objections. The document will be submitted as it stands to the COP plenary for adoption. Thank you very much, distinguished delegates.
Donc, je viens d'être informé.
I have just been informed that we still have some technical issues with the interpretation, in particular with Portuguese. The technical teams are fixing the technical issues. Distinguished delegates and participants, I now invite you to consider items under item 25, aquatic species conservation issues, and we will start with 25.1, fisheries-induced threats and direct take. In order to do so, the first document will be examined, which is document 25.1.1, bycatch and other fisheries-induced mortality. So now I call on Ms. Andrea to present and introduce document 25.1.1. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm presenting document number 25.1.1 on bycatch and other fisheries-induced mortality, which was prepared by the Secretariat. The discussion on the document is currently taking place in the Aquatic Working Group. A CRP is in preparation. The document has 3 annexes. Annex 1 contains the executive summary and recommendations of Reimann and Baker, 2025, a review of technical and operational measures to mitigate bycatch and marine turtles in commercial fisheries. Annex 2 contains proposed amendments to Resolution 1222. Annex 3 contains draft decisions. The document was reviewed by the Scientific Council and has an addendum where the Council's comments and recommendations to the COP are provided. There are also 2 related information documents available that I would like to draw your attention to. Information document 25.1.1 contains the report, a review of technical and operational measures to mitigate bycatch of marine turtles in commercial fisheries, as well as a summary and recommendations. And information document 25.1.1b contains the report, Conservation Impacts of the Global Trade in Fish Maw on Migratory Species. The Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the summary and recommendations provided by Reimann and Baker, contained in Annex 1, to adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 1222 on bycatch, contained in Annex 2, and adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 3. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrea. Delegates and participants, the floor is open.
Peru.
Peru. Good morning, Chair. We have a proposal on the agreement for the effects of the convention for the subject for the definition of a bycatch, which is designated as the capture of any species, because it means aquatic species that are not the target of the fishing gear. We would like this to be included in some way and to ensure that we have avian marine birds also included. Thank you very much. Peru. I see no further requests for the floor. And as you are aware, the Aquatic Working Group is continuing its work. I see Panama has requested the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to say that we support Peru's proposal. Thank you very much, Panama. Do we have any further requests for the floor? Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. We also support the amendment proposed by Peru. Thank you very much, Senegal. I see there's a request from an observer party. But could you please identify yourselves before you speak?
WI and 7 other NGOs whose names I will provide to the Secretariat for the record. We welcome the inclusion of decision text on the impact of the fish maw trade under document 25.1.1 on bycatch and other fisheries-induced mortality, and we strongly urge parties to support decisions 15 BBG and 15 CC, B, C, and D. The global trade in fish maw the swim bladders of teleost fishes, serve the same high-value, high-demand market as shark fin and other dried marine products. As CITES regulation of trade in shark products has reduced the availability of shark fins, the global demand for and the value of fish maws has increased rapidly. This trade pressure is now having serious consequences for both target fishes and by-caught species, including 15 CMS-listed marine mammals, sharks, rays, and marine turtles. Although not a migratory species, the critically endangered vaquita porpoise offers us a cautionary lesson. Bycatch in fisheries targeting the totoaba for its high-value maw has driven the vaquita to the brink of extinction, with 10 or fewer individuals remaining. The proposed decisions offer a timely and practical pathway for CMS to address this issue before it also becomes a crisis for other species, and is an opportunity for CMS to help ensure a coherent and effective global response to this emerging threat. In particular, collaboration with the International Whaling Commission will be crucial to mitigate cetacean bycatch in more fisheries, and we hope that similar efforts can be established for other impacted taxa. Cooperation with CITES will also be essential to improve data collection on more trade and its impacts, and to strengthen trade oversight. Mr. Chair, this is a clear opportunity for CMS to demonstrate leadership on a rapidly growing threat to migratory species. We therefore deeply welcome the initiative taken by the Secretariat and COP-appointed Councillor for Bycatch. We urge parties to adopt these decisions and to commit to working individually and collaboratively across conventions and sectors to ensure that the global maw trade is sustainable and to eliminate the associated bycatch. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much. Australia, you have the floor.
As fish maw fisheries have just been raised, we would like to indicate our full support for the development of effective and appropriate measures to reduce and mitigate bycatch in maw fisheries. Australia is currently funding work through the Pacific Cetaceans MOU in cooperation with Papua New Guinea and regional partners, including SPREP, to address the bycatch impacts of maw fisheries through joint research, community-led management initiatives, and trials of mitigation technologies that reduce entanglement while supporting sustainable livelihoods. We would be pleased to share any outcomes of this work when available, if requested by parties or the Secretariat. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Australia. Do we have any further requests for the floor? I see no further request for the floor. And so I propose that the Secretariat draft a CRP in session document. As we know, the aquatic working group is still going through its work, so the CRP, the in-session document, will be based on the outcomes of that working group, and we will then have an opportunity at this committee to consider the document that comes from that. I see no objections. It is so decided. And so I invite you to move on to the next item of our agenda, 25.1.2, which looks at bycatch of Condictrian species. And I invite Ms. Maria from the Secretariat to present it. Thank you. Ms. Andrea.
Document 25.1.2 on bycatch of Condictrian species was prepared by the Secretariat. The discussion on this document is taking place also in the Aquatic Working Group and will continue during lunchtime today. This document contains one annex, which includes a summary of key elements found in domestic legislation addressing bycatch of constrictor species, which includes elements such as bycatch minimization, safe release, reporting, trade regulations, penalties, and so on. The document was reviewed by the Council and has an addendum that includes the Council's comments and recommendations to this COP. In addition, there is a related information document, information Inf.25.1.2, which contains examples of domestic legislation on constrictor species addressing bycatch. And the Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the summary bycatch of constrictor species, key elements found in domestic legislation contained in the annex of this document. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates and participants, the floor is open. Do we have any requests for the floor, any proposals, comments?
L'Argentine.
Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Argentina would like to indicate that we have progressed considerably with our standards and framework for fisheries, and under our international action plan for the reduction of IUU, we have made significant progress with traceability control and statistical record keeping of the work. And within the framework on fisheries, we have made a contribution to cover the subjects that are under discussion. In particular, the spatial regulation of the space and for cartilaginous fish. And we are also building capacity on responsible fisheries with traceability, monitoring and registration systems. Thank you. Thank you very much, Argentina. Do we have any further requests for the floor? Distinguished delegates and participants, if I may, as this is a summary, this document will be included in the in-session document that will be produced with the previous point, so 25.1.1 and this item are linked, so we will have a single document which will cover both 25.1.1 and 25.1.2, and we will then come back to this. I see no objections, so it is thus decided that we will progress. Thank you. This morning we're seeing very dynamic work. Thank you so much. We must continue at this speed. We have a lot of items to cover this afternoon. So now I call on you to consider item 25.1.3, which covers fish aggregating devices. And I call on the Secretariat to introduce the document. Ms. Jenny, you have the floor.
Aggregating devices, or FADs for short, was prepared by the Secretariat. The discussion on the document started yesterday in the Aquatic Working Group and will continue there today. This document contains two annexes. Annex 1 contains the executive summary and recommendations of the report Relationship between Fish Aggregating Devices and Marine Debris in the Mediterranean Sea, and Annex 2 contains draft decisions. The document was reviewed by the Scientific Council in December, and its comments are available in Addendum 1. There is also one related information document, which is the report I mentioned earlier, available in Inf 25.1.3. The Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the executive summary and recommendations of the report, relationship between fish aggregating devices and marine debris in the Mediterranean Sea, contained in Annex 1, and adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 2 of this document. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jenny. The floor is open. Do we have any requests for the floor? New Zealand, you have the floor.
Does not operate fisheries which utilise FADs. However, we are a member of the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, the WCPFC, where FADs are used as part of the world's largest tuna fishery. The WCPFC has long recognised the need to manage FADs and has implemented several measures relating to FAD design, FAD deployment and FAD reporting. Further work is actively underway to improve reporting, increase the use of biodegradable material and assist with the implementation of recovery programmes. New Zealand supports further work to reduce the environmental impact of FADs on migratory species. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. I now give the floor to IUCN.
For the extensive work on FADs and their contribution to marine debris. Given the known threat FADs are to cetaceans, IWC supports the recommendations outlined in Annex 1 of the Executive Summary and the draft decisions of Annex 2. IWC stands by to assist CMS and its parties in engaging with regional fisheries management organisations and other relevant organisations to implement the recommendations and offer advice and capacity building via our scientific committee and Welfare Working Group for Entanglement and Strandings Response. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam. Are there any further requests for the floor?
Je vois pas.
I see no further requests for the floor. This document is currently being tackled in the Aquatic Species Working Group, so we shall await the outcomes of the working group on this item. And following this, we will have a conference room paper for this item. So we shall come back to it more in depth for consideration and potential adoption within the Committee of the Whole. If you agree, we can move on to the next item of the agenda. I see no objections to this way forward or alternative proposals. Therefore, we shall move on with our agenda. Now, I invite you to move on to the next item, 25.1.4, on aquatic wild meat. And I invite Madam Hydron from the Secretariat to introduce document 25.1.4. You have the floor.
On aquatic wild meat was prepared by the Secretariat and the Scientific Council Working Group on aquatic wild meat. The discussion on the document has already taken place in the Aquatic Working Group, and the CRP for this document has been available since last night.
To orient you a little bit, there has been only one change, one paragraph has been changed in the draft decisions. That's decision 15 CCA that has changed. The document itself contains 3 annexes. Annex 1 is the summary and recommendations of the report Global Review of Direct Take of Seabirds. Annex 2 contains terms of reference for the working group on aquatic wild meat, and Annex 3 contains draft decisions. Since the only changes proposed by the working group relate to Annex 3, the CRP only contains the draft decisions, not the terms of reference. So there are 2 related information documents which I would like to draw your attention to. Information document 25.1.4a, which contains the global review of direct take of seabirds, and information document 25.1.4b, which contains the summary and analysis of implementation reports for the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa. The Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the summary and recommendations of the seabird take report contained in Annex 1 of the document, adopt the terms of reference contained in Annex 2 of the document, and adopt the draft decisions originally contained in Annex 3 of the document, now found in the CRP. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. The floor is now open. Benin, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Since this is the first time that Benin is taking the floor, we wish to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for the excellent organization of this conference, as well as Brazil for the warm welcome we've received. Benin wishes to commend the Secretariat and the working group for the quality of the document at hand. We fully share the concerns in paragraphs 19 and 20. Indeed, unsustainable taking in aquatic matters is a major threat for a number of migratory species on the CMS appendices. In our regional and national context, these issues are directly linked to issues related to poverty and the dependence of local communities on natural resources, as well as food sovereignty. It requires a social and economic approach. This is why Benin, guided by its minister, has accepted the plan of action on aquatic wild meat in West Africa. And we regret, as mentioned in the document, that this has not garnered sufficient attention at international level beyond the CMS. This further highlights the important role of our Convention as a significant international platform. We therefore highlight the need to strengthen science-based policies, to strengthen sharing of data, and implement effective cooperation mechanisms, particularly within the framework of the Initiative on Unsustainable Take. We wish to highlight several key elements. First of all, capacity building for developing countries in terms of monitoring, control, and enforcement. Secondly, the involvement of local communities for their engagement and active involvement. Third, the promotion of viable economic alternatives to reduce dependency on unsustainable take of aquatic species. And lastly, mobilization of financial resources, without which developing countries such as ours struggle to fully implement the measures recommended. In closing, Chair, Benin supports the adoption of the terms of reference of the Working Group on Aquatic Wild Meat and reaffirms its commitment to work alongside countries to ensure sustainable management of migratory species and the preservation of aquatic ecosystems which our populations depend on. Thank you. Thank you very much, Benin. The European Union, you have the floor.
I speak on behalf of the EU and its 27 member states. The EU and its member states recognize that aquatic wild meat remains a significant and under-addressed threat to migratory marine and freshwater species. We welcome the progress since COP14, including the strengthening of the Aquatic Wild Meat Working Group, the global review of direct take of seabirds, and efforts to advance the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa. We support the key recommendations of the seabird review, including improving scientific knowledge on seabird take, strengthening coordination and information sharing with relevant international instruments, and exploring co-management approaches with indigenous peoples and local communities. The EU and its member states support the adoption of the draft decisions under this agenda item, including the establishment of formal terms of reference for the Aquatic Wild Meat Working Group and the request to assess the migratory nature of crocodilians and freshwater chelonians. At the same time, we believe that cooperation with other relevant multilateral fora, including CITES and the IWC, could be strengthened beyond information sharing in order to ensure better coordination of ongoing work. Finally, we support the draft decisions related to the implementation of the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvest in West Africa. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Yep. Okay, thank you. The unsustainable take of aquatic wild meat poses a long-term risk to many migratory marine species, as mobile species protected in one region could be captured, killed or eaten in another region. New Zealand seabirds are known to be harvested as food by crew operating on non-CMS party fishing vessels in the high seas, but the nature and extent of this problem is still poorly understood. It is deemed to be a particular risk for some of our largest seabirds like the Appendix 1 listed Antipodean albatross and also the southern royal albatross. A report was prepared on the global review of the direct take of seabirds, to which New Zealand contributed information, and there was also a journal article produced on this topic, and this report's available here as an info document. A couple of key points from it. The review follows the recent recognition that hunting and trapping is the fourth biggest threat to seabirds. And interestingly, it also found that there's quite a human health risk from consumption of seabirds because a lot of them accumulate heavy metals and that can then pass into the human food chain. And so thank you for that.
Merci beaucoup, la Nouvelle-Zélande.
Thank you, New Zealand. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Senegal also supports these draft decisions. As you are aware, Chair, aquatic wild meat harvests, particularly in West Africa, are a growing threat for migratory species and the health of coastal and marine ecosystems. This issue is directly linked to matters such as food sovereignty, poverty, and the dependence of local communities on natural resources. It is therefore vital to strengthen international cooperation, to engage in national capacity building, and to offer sustainable alternatives to reduce pressure whilst supporting livelihoods. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senegal. Côte d'Ivoire, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Since this is the first time we are taking the floor, we wish to thank, in doing so, the host country and the government of Brazil for the warm welcome. Côte d'Ivoire supports this draft decision. Our country considers that the regional plan on aquatic wild meat harvests addresses a major threat which brings together biodiversity matters, food security and sustainability. It threatens aquatic ecosystems and the well-being of communities. This is why we reaffirm our commitment under the CMS Convention and our alignment with the regional priorities as set out by the West African Development Community. We have made significant strides and undertaken significant efforts in terms of strengthening our national legislation for wildlife, as well as addressing illegal harvesting, as well as introducing awareness-raising measures among the population. However, we are convinced that the response must be balanced and global and must adopt a holistic approach addressing the dependence of communities on these resources. This is why our country supports the development of alternatives such as sustainable harvesting, the One Health approach, including zoonoses, and the engagement of local stakeholders is essential. We must address this at an international and sub-regional level. These matters are cross-border, and we need to focus on monitoring and better sharing information. We call for greater support from technical and financial partners to effectively support the implementation of the action plan. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Côte d'Ivoire. Liberia, you have the floor.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Liberia is gratified as a contracting party to attend and actively participate in this year COP15 here in Cape Grand, Brazil. Since it's my first time speaking, permits me to express my thanks and appreciation to the government of Brazil for the excellent organization and hospitality for the 2026 COP15. Liberia is making progress in the development of appropriate documents aimed at domesticating the convention and conducting appropriate training programs for wildlife technicians. We have had regular field monitoring at protected areas, including chimpanzee rescue sanctuary, bear watch activities. These robust exercises have made the required national impact due to stronger collaboration among the relevant sectors, ministry, and agency. Synergy with related conventions like CBD and the Ramsar Convention have also been enhanced. This collaborative effort has enabled us to address some of our key challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, Liberia supports the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvest in West Africa. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Panama welcomes the document 2514, and we recognize the technical work undertaken by the Working Group on Aquatic Wild Meat of the Scientific Council. We consider that their assessments are key when it comes to correctly addressing an issue which in many cases remains underestimated. This is why we continue to support its terms of reference, as well as the development of effective measures to reduce the unsustainable use of aquatic migratory species. This requires a decisive approach, and evidence shows us that take of aquatic meat is a significant pressure for vulnerable species. This is why we need to adopt science-based approaches with a precautionary approach. Within this context, Panama considers that it is essential to strengthen cooperation with the International Whaling Commission, including through the Small Cetaceans Committee, in order to ensure complementarity and greater impact in conservation measures. We also highlight the emergency of implementing the West Africa Action Plan, which will help certain species which are under threat. This is why we will focus on translating these measures into action on the ground. We also support further work under this group and within technical committees to better understand threats and to accelerate the adoption of effective responses. Thank you. Thank you, Panama. The Dominican Republic, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. This is the first time that the Dominican Republic is taking the floor. We wish to take this opportunity to thank the organizers and the government of Brazil for organizing this wonderful event. We wish to fully support the suggestions made by our colleagues from Panama regarding the take and use of aquatic wild meat. Mammals. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup de
Thank you very much to the Dominican Republic. Distinguished delegates, dear participants. Let me announce that the conference room paper on this item has already been published online, as the working group had already begun working on this item yesterday. It was planned that we were to discuss this conference paper. Would you wish to discuss this now or this afternoon? I'll give the floor to Ghana first, and we'll come back to this question in a minute. Ghana, you have the floor.
Brazil so much for organizing such a very wonderful conference. And I wish to also state that Ghana, as the earlier speakers just mentioned, we, as a West African country, also wishes to support the documents on the need to address aquatic wild meat harvest in West Africa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ghana. I have one last request for the floor from an observer, BEES. Please identify yourself. You have the floor. Thank you very much. I'm speaking on behalf of Benin Environment and Education Society, BEES, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Working Group on Aquatic Wild Meat. Chair, I wish to express the thanks of the Working Group to parties who have been involved for their renewed commitment. Of course, we regret that the mobilization efforts of the Secretariat among parties in order to collect basic data on the implementation of the regional plan for aquatic wild meat in West Africa has not been sufficiently heeded. We understand this is frustrating. However, we hear the reasons which have been expressed by Benin, Côte d'Ivoire and Senegal. As a country of the region, which is which is facing this challenge, I am fully aware of the challenges that the region faces on a daily basis. The working group remains fully committed to supporting parties as well as partner organizations and communities to set up regional and national working groups to strengthen cooperation among stakeholders. We look forward to pursuing this work in cooperation with sister organizations, as mentioned, in order to ensure the long-term conservation of aquatic migratory species and the ecosystems that they depend on. Thank you. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Pro Wildlife, RARE. Please identify yourself. You have the floor.
want to use the opportunity to thank Brazil for its warm welcome here in Campo Grande. I want to echo the previous speakers. Observed trends in aquatic wild meat harvests are concerning. To cite an example, Okiere et al. Analyzed cetacean landings recorded from artisanal fisheries in 12 communities in Ghana. Landings increased about 31% from 2022-2023 season to the 23-24 season. CMS Appendix 2 listed clymene dolphin as well as the pantropical spotted dolphin accounted for the majority of the landings, yet more than 15 species are directly affected. Cetaceans are often bicaught in gill nets, but also targeted directly for human consumption, as well as using dolphin meat as bait for shark fisheries. Thus, initiatives like the Action Plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa are an important tool to engage all stakeholders, promote enforcement, and support, educate, and collaborate with coastal communities for the long-term benefits of humans, cetaceans, and the entire marine ecosystem. Therefore, we support the draft decisions. Since it's not only a local restricted issue but a global concern, we particularly urge parties to consider draft decision 15 AAB to establish regional action plans to reduce aquatic wild meat hunting and consumption in other parts of the world. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Pro-wildlife. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, as I mentioned earlier, the conference room paper on this item has already been published online. I would like to ask you whether you are ready to consider it now or whether you require more time to take a look at this document. Have you had time to read through the conference room paper, which was published by the Secretariat on the basis of discussions within the working group? I see no reactions. May I take it that you have had time to read through this CRP? May I take it that you agree with the document and we can send it to the plenary, or should we come back to it later this afternoon after lunch? Are there any objections to this proposal?
Est-ce qu'on peut...
May I take it that we can transfer this document to the plenary session? Or do you need to hold more discussions on this item this afternoon? I see no objections. I therefore take it that the Committee of the Whole agrees to transfer this conference room paper on this item of the agenda, which was published on the website of the convention, to the COP. I see no objections. The document, the CRP, conference room paper, as it stands, as published online, can be sent to the plenary of the COP for adoption. It is so decided. Thank you very much, distinguished delegates, dear participants. Since we still have a half hour ahead of us, I suggest we move on with our agenda to the next item on marine pollution. I invite Ms. Jenny from the Secretariat to introduce document 25.2.1. You have the floor.
25.2.1 on marine pollution was prepared by the COP15 Councillor for Marine Pollution and the Secretariat. The discussion on the document started yesterday in the Aquatic Working Group and will continue there today. This document contains 4 annexes, Annex 1 contains recommendations of the report of the CMS Marine Pollution Workshop. Annex 2 contains the draft terms of reference for the proposed Marine Pollution Working Group. Annex 3 contains the draft resolution, and Annex 4 contains the draft decisions. The document was reviewed by the Scientific Council in December and has been revised. There is also a related information document, 25.2.1, which contains the report of the CMS Marine Pollution Workshop held in May 2025. The Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the recommendations of the report of the CMS Marine Pollution Workshop contained in Annex 1 of this document, adopt the terms of reference for the Marine Pollution Working Group contained in Annex 2, adopt the draft resolution in Annex 3, and adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 4. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, the floor is now open.
Je demande au conseiller nommé par la...
May I ask the COP-appointed councillor if they wish to take the floor on this item? Yes, please go ahead.
Les équipes techniques, s'il vous plaît.
Could I ask the technical teams to please activate the microphone of the CMS COP-appointed councillor?
Their hard work in organising the related documents, and I would only take the floor just briefly to emphasise to parties and observers that what we've got in front of us is a process where we've taken advice from marine pollution experts from all over the world. We've distilled that through a workshop and its conclusions. And the main thing that we would like to give to you, we'd like to take forward, is a working group of experts, again, to be brought together from all over the world, who will be able to advise the convention and advise parties in the best way that we can address this very complex nexus of threats. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank the councillor, and I now give the floor to the Cook Islands.
Of COP15. The Cook Islands support the adoption of this draft resolution and decisions. As a large ocean state, marine pollution is not a distant threat. It is a direct and growing pressure on migratory species, ocean health, and the livelihoods and cultures of our people. We welcome the recognition in this document that marine pollution is multidimensional, including plastics, chemical pollutants, wastewater, abandoned fishing gear, and emerging threats. We also strongly support the emphasis on cumulative and synergistic impacts, particularly the interaction between pollution and climate change. In this regard, we highlight 4 priorities. 1, addressing the land-based and transboundary sources of pollution. We support strong action on land-based sources, including wastewater, sediments, and chemical discharges, which are significant drivers of marine degradation in island contexts. We also emphasize the need for international cooperation, given the transboundary nature of pollution affecting migratory species across ocean basins. Secondly is tackling plastic pollution and abandoned fishing gear. We underscore the urgent need to address plastic pollution, including microplastics and abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear, which pose serious risk to migratory species such as turtles, seabirds, sharks, and marine mammals. We strongly urge the need to adopt a legally binding plastics treaty that is effective and has a full life cycle approach, addressing not just the downstream measures, but also upstream measures such as sustainable production and midstream measures such as product design and chemicals and plastics. Thirdly, is to strengthen monitoring and science policy linkages. We welcome the emphasis on effective-based monitoring, the use of stranding networks, and the identification of pollution hotspots overlapping with critical habitats. For SIDS, access to monitoring capacity and data systems remain a key gap, and we call for targeted support to enable participation in these efforts. Lastly, applying the precautionary principle to emerging threats. The Cook Islands supports a precautionary approach to emerging risks, particularly where scientific uncertainty remains, but potential impacts on migratory species are significant. From a SIDS perspective, implementation will depend on adequate, effective, transparent, and predictable support, including for monitoring, response systems, and capacity building to address shared pollution challenges across migratory routes. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I thank the Cook Islands. Somalia, you have the floor.
Marine pollution as serious threat to the migratory species and marine ecosystem. As coastal country, Somalia has taken action by banning single-use plastic to reduce plastic pollution and to protect marine life. However, challenges remain, including pollution from fishing activities, waste management gaps, and limited capacity. Somalia therefore calls for strong international cooperation, technical support, and capacity building to address marine pollution effectively. We reaffirm our commitment to protecting migratory species and ensuring the sustainability of our marine environment. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Somalia. Liberia, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Liberia. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Wants to reiterate that this is a very important issue for the Oceania region, and we support the Cook Islands intervention just made. Thanks very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, New Zealand. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Senegal also supports this draft decision, and we recognize that marine pollution, in particular plastic pollution, is a major threat for migratory species, and it affects their habitat, their health, and their life cycle. The data on the implementation of 14.41 and 14.43 and 14.225b are to be welcomed, the progress made, but we must build international cooperation and capacity building in countries. It is essential to adopt the draft decisions proposed and the draft resolution to ensure we follow up with the Samarkand strategic plan for migratory species so we protect migratory species and their ecosystems. Thank you. Thank you, Senegal, says the Chair. Fiji, you have the floor.
New Zealand regarding this draft decision. Fiji believes this decision is important as the marine pollution affects the migratory species around the world. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Fiji. Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Argentina considers that the document after analysis is imbalanced and linked to resolution 14.6 of 2024. And in particular, we would like to point out it covers subjects linked to exploitation of the seabed, which are only under the purview of the International Seabed Authority and in accordance to the UN clause. And we think that this forum should avoid duplication and fragmentation of themes that have specific areas for their treatment. We think it's important to continue negotiations under the competent framework, so we would like to avoid the reference to exploitation of marine beds in this document. Thank you. Thank you, Argentina. Peru. Peru supports the draft decision and the new resolution on marine pollution. Thank you very much, Peru. The Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic would also like to support that which was said by the delegation of Argentina on the seabed and the various conventions that cover the subject. Thank you. Thank you to the Dominican Republic. And I now give the floor to UNEP.
Comes the decision requesting strengthened engagement on marine pollution with the regional seas conventions and action plans. UNEP emphasizes that advancing synergies across MEAs is essential for coherent and effective implementation of all obligations and commitments, particularly related to marine pollution, which we all know represents a major pressure on migratory species and their habitats. In this regard, UNEP would like to highlight that the Regional Seas Conventions and Action Plans, and in particular their protocols on land-based sources of pollution, provide established regional governance frameworks through which countries cooperate to prevent, reduce, and control marine pollution from land-based activities. Together with the Global Program of Action for the Protection of Marine Environment from Land-Based Activities, known as the GPA, these frameworks provide coherent, global and regional approach to addressing marine pollution and affecting migratory species. UNEP looks forward to strengthening collaboration between CMS and the Regional Seas Program, which encompasses the 18 Regional Seas Conventions and Action Plans. UNEP reaffirms its commitment to strengthening practical, implementation-oriented synergies, including through capacity building, regional cooperation, and coordinated support to parties at national and regional levels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, UNEP. Ocean Care, you have the floor.
About the impacts of chemical and other marine pollution on migratory species, both from a conservation and an animal welfare perspective. We therefore strongly support the adoption of the resolution on marine pollution and the associated decisions. The establishment of a working group on marine pollution will greatly help this convention and its parties to address this diverse and complex topic, and Ocean Care would like to assist this working group in any way appropriate. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to ACOBAMS.
The Mediterranean and the Black Seas and the contiguous Atlantic waters faces very high levels of marine pollution. And this topic has been on the agenda of the Scientific Committee of ACOBAMS since the beginning of their work. Therefore, we do support the document and the annexes pretty much, and we fully agree with the intervention made by the colleague from the Cook Islands. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, ACOBAMS.
Thank you, ACOBAMS. I now give the floor to Samoa. You have the floor.
New Zealand and Fiji and supports a draft decision on marine pollution. We welcome the work of the Scientific Council and the outcomes of the workshop, which clearly highlight the increasing and cumulative threats of pollution on migratory species. For Pacific SIDS like Samoa, these impacts are already being felt, particularly from plastic pollution, abandoned fishing gear, and emerging chemical pollutants. We support the focus on these impacts, migratory corridors, and strengthened global cooperation. At the same time, we emphasize as well the need for practical implementation strengthen monitoring and support for the regional approaches in the Pacific. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Samoa. Distinguished delegates and participants, on the basis of the discussion and the exchanges we have heard, it would seem that this item of the agenda would benefit from a greater in-depth discussion in the working group. So this will be sent to the relevant working group for the production of a CRP following their discussions, which will give us the matters to discuss following that. Is the meeting in agreement with following this way forward, or are there alternative options that anyone would like to suggest? I see no objection. It is so decided. This item will go for in-depth discussion within the relevant working group. I see we still have a bit of time before the lunch break. So we will move on to the next item, which covers underwater noise. And I would call on Ms. Heidi from the Secretariat to introduce 25.2.2. Thank you.
By the Secretariat, together with the Joint Noise Working Group of CMS, ACOBAMS and ASCOBANS. The discussion on the document will take place, if necessary, in the Aquatic Working Group. The document has 3 annexes. Annex 1 contains the current work plan for the Joint Noise Working Group, which I stress current because this is updated regularly with new mandates from CMS, ACOBAMS and ASCOBANS as they arise. Annex 2 contains the summary and recommendations of the report on anthropogenic underwater noise impacts and mitigation strategies for CMS-listed freshwater mammals, cetaceans, sirenians and otters, and their prey species. Annex 3 contains draft decisions. The document was reviewed by the Scientific Council without any revisions having been proposed. There is also a related information document 25.2.2, which contains the full report on noise impacts and noise mitigation measures for CMS-listed freshwater mammal species. The Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the work plan of the Joint Noise Working Group as contained in Annex 1, to note the summary and recommendations of the report on anthropogenic underwater noise impacts for freshwater mammals and their prey, contained in Annex 2, and adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 3 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much. The floor is open. Australia, you have the floor.
Finalising national anthropogenic underwater noise guidelines, which will provide science-based guidance for mitigating the risk of underwater noise impacts on threatened and migratory marine species protected under national law. Publication of the guidelines is planned for later in 2026. The guidelines will consider impacts on cetaceans, dugongs, pinnipeds, marine turtles, and diving seabirds, and include mitigation measures tailored to impulsive and non-impulsive noise sources, such as shipping, geophysical surveys, and construction activities, including pile driving. We will be happy to share the guidelines when finalised to enable Scientific Council to assess whether updates to the CMS family guidelines on environmental impact assessment for marine noise-generating activities are required. Australia supports CMS efforts to expand the scope of underwater noise work to freshwater ecosystems and understands that specific guidance for freshwater habitats is also needed. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Australia. Brazil, you have the floor.
for the conservation of migratory species and can support the continuation of CMS work on this issue in both marine and freshwater environments. At the same time, we stress that the Convention should avoid prescriptive approaches in areas already being addressed by a competent fora, particularly the IMO, whose technical guidance on shipping, seismic surveys, and pile driving remains highly relevant. We also underline that measures such as vessel speed reduction should not, at this stage, be endorsed as a general mitigation tool, given the remaining scientific and technical uncertainties. Brazil already has national experience in regulatory tools in place, including IBAMA's guidance on marine biota monitoring and seismic surveys and ongoing studies on impulsive noise linked to offshore wind development. Any further CMS action should therefore preserve national flexibility, respect domestic regulatory frameworks, and ensure that possible restrictions on fishing or freshwater activities are based on specific technical assessment, the best available science, and due consideration of local realities and competent national authorities. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Monaco. Thank you very much, Chair. Monaco would like to thank the Secretariat of the CMS as well as the joint working group, CMS ASCOBAMS group, for putting together this document. We give a great deal of importance to matters relating to underwater noise, which present a growing pressure on species, in particular cetaceans, but as we can see, freshwater mammals and their prey. And we encourage the continuation of the scientific work that's underway to ensure that we continue to increase knowledge. And we also welcome the work with the CMS, with other instruments on the same subject to ensure that we pay particular attention to migratory species there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Monaco. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Panama recognizes that underwater noise is one of the major emerging threats for aquatic species. The scientific evidence clearly shows that noise perturbs harms physically and can lead to the death of many marine species. Freshwater migratory species also are subject to the same vulnerabilities. We must reduce the impact of noise on the environments for aquatic species. So Panama, as a member of the Coalition for a Quiet Ocean, is considering this a major and significant step in moving towards achieving the goals of the Convention protecting migratory species in all aquatic environments. Thank you. Thank you very much, Panama. I have a request from an observer, the World Wildlife Conservation Society. You have the floor.
Works actively conducting research on underwater noise and its interactions with species across multiple regions around the world. We strongly support the proposed draft decisions addressing anthropogenic underwater noise. Underwater noise remains a pervasive and increasing transboundary threat to marine wildlife, including migratory species and their prey, yet implementation of existing CMS guidance has been constrained by limited resources and uneven uptake. We urge parties to apply a precautionary approach by systematically integrating underwater noise considerations into marine and freshwater spatial planning and environmental impact assessments, making full use of the CMS guidelines that are available. WCS supports the development of habitat-specific mitigation guidance for marine and freshwater environments that will enable parties to identify, manage, and maintain acoustically important areas, including noise refugia and high-risk hotspots. Integrating underwater noise management into the design and management of protected and conserved areas offers a pathway to deliver tangible conservation outcomes aligned with CMS objectives. Strengthening capacity building and securing sustainable funding for this work will be essential to achieving meaningful reductions in underwater noise and to meeting both the objectives of the Samarkand Strategic Plan and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Dominican Republic. You have the floor. Thank you, Chair. We support the proposal on the impact of underwater noise, and we are in particular interested in the area of impact produced in the environments of migration and their temporary resting places for cetaceans, in particular the humpback whale in their winter areas, and all that is related to whale watching through cruise ships or on tourist boats. For us, it is extremely important, and the Dominican Republic has made a great deal of progress with more than 20 years of working on tourism involving whale watching is an important part of our economy. Thank you. Thank you very much to the Dominican Republic. I now give the floor to IWC.
On anthropogenic underwater noise impacts and mitigation strategies for CMS-listed freshwater mammals, and notes its relevance to many cetacean species present within IWC member states, for which the recommendations are particularly pertinent. IWC also undertakes extensive work in this area through both the scientific and conservation committees. This work includes engaging with the International Maritime Organization and its Marine Environmental Protection Committee, and we look forward to further joint work with CMS and other organizations going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, IWC. That was the last request for the floor on my list, and I see there are no further requests for the floor. So, dear colleagues, we have Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Senegal also supports this draft decision. As you are aware, marine pollution can also involve significant underwater noise. These are noises that disturb the communication and reproduction of marine species, in particular cetaceans that use echolocation, and this can also lead to abnormal behavior and forced displacement, as well as mass strandings for cetaceans in particular, and this harms the work and changes the ecosystem balances. That is why we defend this and support it. Thank you very much, Senegal. South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to you and distinguished delegates. South Africa supports the draft resolution on the impact of underwater noise on migratory species. Furthermore, South Africa is actively conducting research on the impact of seismic surveys and marine noise on the foraging distributions of species. such as seabeds and various cetaceans. South Africa therefore endorses aligning underwater noise management with the International Whaling Commission and other international agreements and support the decision. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, South Africa. So that was the last speaker on my list. Distinguished delegates, on the basis of the discussions we have had, and as this agenda item is still under discussion in the relevant working group, it has been decided that we will send this item to the working group to discuss it in further depth. So, delegates and participants, it is almost 12:30. We are coming to the end of our morning session, and before I adjourn the session, I will give the floor to the Secretariat for some announcements.
So, just to be clear, all of the working groups are continuing in the same rooms they've been in, but I'll read them out. The Credentials Committee in the Ariana room, the Budget Working Group in the Prima Matuba room, Aquatic Working Group in the Pintado room, Avian Working Group in the Albatross room, and the Cross-Cutting Working Group in the Pantanal room, where it will discuss 25.5, wildlife health, and then 20.1, the development of the next report on the state of the world's migratory species. All of these groups will meet at this lunchtime. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup,
I thank the Secretariat, distinguished delegates and participants. I thank you for your commitment this morning, and I declare the meeting adjourned. We will start again at 1500, 3 p.m. Thank you.